You're listening to the Philosopher's Note on the Dao De Jing. More wisdom in less time.
Hi, this is Brian. Welcome to the Philosopher's Notes on the Dao De Jing, a new English version by Stephen Mitchell, originally by Lao Tzu. We'll start with a quote. I have just 3 things to teach: simplicity, patience, compassion. These 3 are your greatest treasures. Simple in actions and in thoughts, you return to the source of being. Patient with both friends and enemies, you accord with the way things are. Compassionate toward yourself, you reconcile all beings in the world. End quote. That's Lao Tzu from the Dao De Jing. The Dao De Jing, a classic of spiritual literature and the central text of Taoism. Although the text's authorship and date of composition continues to be debated, tradition holds that it was written by the great master Lao Tzu in the 6th century BCE, roughly the same time Buddha was rocking Nepal and India, and Confucius was rocking another part of China, and not too long before Socrates was getting his toga plus his hemlock on in Athens. There are a lot of translations out there, and I went with Stephen Mitchell's simple pocket version for this note because A, it's a great intro if you're new to Lao Tzu and Taoism, and B, I love the fact that Mitchell is married to Byron Katie, and that they co-wrote Loving What Is, you can see the notes on that, and 1,000 Names for Joy together. How cool is that? Mitchell is a remarkable guy in his own right. According to Wikipedia, he's done translations in German, Hebrew, Greek, Latin, French, Spanish, Italian, and Danish, as well as interpretive versions of works in Chinese, Sanskrit, and ancient Babylonian. Wow. That's a big brain. As you can imagine, the Dao De Jing is brimming with wisdom and big ideas. I've picked a handful of my favorites for discussion and hope you enjoy. We'll start with the first big idea, making use of solitude. Quote, ordinary men hate solitude, but the master makes use of it, embracing his aloneness, realizing he is one with the whole universe. End quote. Stillness. If we want to tune into the divine, we've got to soak it up. Deepak Chopra says this in his transformative classic, The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. You can see the notes on that. He says, but first you have to practice stillness. Stillness is the first requirement of manifesting your desires, because in stillness lies your connection to the field of pure potentiality that can orchestrate an infinity of details for you. Joseph Campbell talks about the importance of feeding our bliss with quiet. He says this, quote, this is an absolute necessity for anybody today. You must have a room or a certain hour or so a day where you don't know what was in the newspapers this morning, you don't know who your friends are, you don't know what you owe anybody, you don't know what anybody owes you. This is a place where you can simply experience and bring forth what you are and what you might be. This is the place of creative incubation. At first, you might not find anything happens there, but if you have a sacred place and use it, something eventually will happen. End quote. So, how's your stillness working for you? You hate it or embrace it? Can you turn off the TV or the talk radio or the internet, plus the cell phone and the iPod and the and immerse yourself in some sacred silence today and tomorrow and the next day? Let's get on that. Leads us to the next big idea, money and happiness. Quote, fame or integrity, which is more important? Money or happiness, which is more valuable? Success or failure, which is more destructive? If you look to others for fulfillment, you will never be truly fulfilled. If your happiness depends on money, you will never be happy with yourself. Be content with what you have. Rejoice in the way things are. When you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you. End quote. Powerful. Let's focus for the moment on this line. If your happiness depends on money, you will never be happy with yourself. That's pretty much been scientifically proven at this point. Beyond a certain level of sustenance living, money just doesn't make us as happy as we think it will. In fact, in her great book, The How of Happiness, see notes, Sonia Lyubomirsky tells us that while 50% of our happiness levels are influenced by our genetics and 40% are under our direct control via thoughts and behaviors, only 10% is attributed to stuff like money, cars, houses, etc. Unfortunately, most of us spend most of our time chasing the material affluence, or at least signs of it, that we think will make us happy. It doesn't. We get on what psychologists call a hedonic treadmill, and the more we get, the more we want. After the quick hit of joy that we feel or pleasure that we feel from the new car or home or wardrobe, after that wears off, we want more. And tragically, we're rarely able to hold a desire for more with a deep appreciation for what we have. Eek, that's not a good recipe. The solution, well, in Sonia's words, we've got to focus on the 40% that's within our control. As she says, quote, what makes up this 40%? Besides our genes and the situations that we confront, there is one critical thing left, our behavior. Thus, the key to happiness lies not in changing our genetic makeup, which is impossible, and not in changing our circumstances, i.e. seeking wealth or attractiveness or better colleagues, which is usually impractical, but in our daily intentional activities. With this in mind, our pie chart illustrates the potential of the 40% that is within our ability to control. The 40% for room to maneuver, for opportunities to increase or decrease happiness levels through what we do in our daily lives and how we think. End quote. The next big idea is the master holds nothing back. Quote, the master gives himself up to whatever the moment brings. He knows that he is going to die, and he has nothing left to hold on to. No illusions in his mind, no resistances in his body. He doesn't think about his actions. They flow from the core of his being. He holds nothing back from life. Therefore, he is ready for death, as a man is ready for sleep after a good day's work. End quote. Beautiful. Reminds me of Marcus Aurelius' wisdom from his classic Meditations. You can see the notes on that. Aurelius advises us, quote, take it that you have died today, and your life's story is ended. And henceforward, regard what future time may be given you as an uncovenanted surplus, and live it out in harmony with nature. He also tells us, were you to live 3,000 years or even 30,000, remember that the sole life which a man can lose is that which he is living at the moment, and furthermore, that he can have no other life except the one he loses. This means that the longest life and the shortest amount to the same thing. For the passing minute is every man's equal possession, but what has once gone by is not ours. End quote. So do you think you're going to live forever? And so what if you do? The only thing we have is this moment, and this moment, and ... So let's embrace what the moment brings. And remember Seneca's wisdom. He says, as it is with a play, so it is with life. What matters is not how long the acting lasts, but how good it is. And Seneca also says, every day, therefore, should be regulated as if it were the one that brings up the rear, the one that rounds out and completes our lives. The next big idea is the shadow that he himself casts. Quote, a great nation is like a great man. When he makes a mistake, he realizes it. Having realized it, he admits it. Having admitted it, he corrects it. He considers those who point out his faults as his most benevolent teachers. He thinks of his enemy as the shadow that he himself casts. Love it. First, let's change our perception around seeing our faults. It's a positive thing to catch ourselves doing something less than our best. And let's take a peek at the shadows we're casting in the process. First, the positive negativity. Vernon Howard says this in his classic, The Power of Your Supermind. You can see the notes on that. He says, quote, encourage yourself by remembering that any detection of negativity within you is a positive act, not a negative one. Awareness of your weakness and confusion makes you stronger because conscious awareness is the bright light that destroys the darkness of negativity. Honest self-observation dissolves pains and pressures that formerly did their dreadful work in the darkness of unawareness. This is so important that I urge you to memorize and reflect upon the following summary. Detection of inner negativity is not a negative act, but a courageously positive act that makes you a new person. End quote. And Michael Beckwith, you can see the notes on spiritual liberation, says pretty much the same thing. He says, not all pain is negative, even though we label all forms of pain as such and resist them. Positive negativity is a circumstance that causes us to go deeper, to search ourselves, to stop placing blame on the causes of suffering outside ourselves, and take self-responsibility. Circumstances arise and hard times come so that we may grow through them, so that we may evolve. I like to say that a bad day for the ego is a good day for the soul. When we look back on some of our most challenging experiences, we admit that we wouldn't trade what we gained from them for remaining the same as we were. Something within acknowledges that during those times when we are pressed against the ropes of life, we learn to become more generous, to forgive, to never give up on ourselves or others. We learn to regenerate, to rejuvenate, to surrender. So let's redefine our relationship to pain, fault, seeing, challenges, shall we? And now for a little shadow fun. As Lao Tzu says, quote, he thinks of his enemy as the shadow that he himself casts. This is echoed throughout the modern literature as well. One of my favorite books on the subject and a great intro to our shadow challenges is Debbie Ford's The Dark Side of the Light Chasers. You can see the notes on that. She says it's as if we have electrical sockets on our chest. And if we're ever triggered by someone, it's because they plugged into an aspect of ourselves that we haven't fully owned. If we've integrated the trait we're finding so annoying in the other person, we might observe the annoying behavior, but we wouldn't be truly triggered by it, right? It's kind of like that electrical socket has a cover on it, or it's open and people can plug into it. Does that make sense? The idea that we project our shadow on others and are triggered by our own disowned attributes showing up in others is a huge idea. Here's how the guys from The Power of Full Engagement, you can see the notes, put it. They say, difficult and unpleasant as it may be to accept, we often feel most hostile to those who remind us of aspects of ourselves that we prefer not to see. Ask someone to give a description of the personality type which he finds most despicable, most unbearable, and hateful, and most impossible to get along with, writes Edward Whitmont, and he will produce a description of his own repressed characteristics. These very qualities are so unacceptable to him precisely because they represent his own repressed side. Only that which we cannot accept within ourselves do we find impossible to live with in others. Think for a moment of someone you actively dislike. What quality in that person do you find most objectionable? Now ask yourself, how am I that? We can obviously go off on this for a while. That's an end quote. And we do in the other notes. But for now, how can we view our flaws with a smile and ask, how am I that, when we find ourselves feisty? The next big idea is the journey of 1,000 miles. Quote, prevent trouble before it arises. Put things in order before they exist. The giant pine tree grows from a tiny sprout. The journey of 1,000 miles starts from beneath your feet. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. Or, as Mitchell adapts it here, the journey of 1,000 miles starts from beneath your feet. Such a powerful concept and so easy to forget and or ignore. One of my favorite books on the subject is called One Small Step. Quick side note, my friend Sean Stevenson recommended this book to me. And Sean's a therapist, coach, public speaker who shares the stage with people like His Holiness the Dalai Lama. In little detail, he was born with a crippling bone disorder that left him 3 feet tall. Stunning story you can learn more about in his book, Get Off Your Butt and Take a Stand. Plus, you can click in the PDF to see a video of him on Jimmy Kimmel Live. Super funny. Anyway, back to One Small Step. In this great book, the author tells us how important it is to avoid the overwhelm we can feel when we see the enormity of making a change. And he points out the fact that usually this fear isn't even on a conscious level. It's our subconscious, technically our amygdala, trying to protect us from change it sees as threatening. The solution, as he sees it, is to sidestep this fear mechanism by starting small. He tells us that rather than get intimidated by the huge exercise plan, just commit to stepping in place during one commercial break a day for 30 days. Or commit to flossing just one tooth a night. It may sound silly, but it's amazing. I often do it with these notes, sometimes finishing the note, or certainly finishing all 100 notes when I first started, felt a little daunting or feels a little daunting when I'm not totally on. So I'll say to myself, self, Let's just do one big idea, then we're good. And by the way, it's very important you address yourself as self. I love that. So what often happens is that I get on a roll, and before I know it, the note's done. It's awesome, just one small step. Same thing with the exercise plan or the flossing or the whatever it is in your life. Remember, the journey of 1,000 miles starts from beneath your feet. So, what's your next step? All you ever have to worry about is the next step, and the next, and the next. And it goes on from there. P.S. Here's an incredible story the author shares in his book, One Small Step. You might dig it. He says, quote, "The study of persuasive techniques consistently demonstrates Kaizen's power to melt even the toughest resistance. In one rather humorous study, homeowners in one Southern California neighborhood were once asked by volunteers if they would mind displaying a small sign that read, 'Be a safe driver,' in one of their windows. Most of them agreed. Homeowners in another neighborhood chosen for its similarity to the first were not asked to display the sign. 2 weeks later, homeowners in both neighborhoods were asked if they would allow a billboard bearing the same message to be installed on their front lawns. They were shown photos that made it plain their house would be dwarfed by the billboard. To make the request even less attractive, the lettering on the billboard was poorly executed. The group that had not been approached about the small sign refused the billboard 83% of the time. While the group that had made the small step in the first neighborhood, however, agreed to the billboard 76% of the time. The small step made the larger one 4 times more likely. That's amazing. Here's another little PPS. How about some more mojo from the Lao Tzu-inator? He says, quote, "Confront the difficult while it is easy. Accomplish the great task by a series of small acts." The next big idea is compete? Nah, let's playfully create. Quote, "The best athlete wants his opponent at his best. The best general enters the mind of his enemy. The best businessman serves the communal good. The best leader follows the will of the people. All of them embody the virtue of non-competition. Not that they don't love to compete, but they do it in the spirit of play. In this, they are like children and in harmony with the Tao." End quote. Brilliant. Did you know the origin of the word compete has nothing to do with our modern idea of going against someone else? Nope. The word comes together from the Latin competere and means to strive or contend for something, together, not against. It's from com, which is together, and petere, which is aim at or seek. And I love Wallace D. Wattles' mojo on the subject as well. In The Science of Getting Rich, he tells us, you are to become a creator, not a competitor. You are going to get what you want, but in such a way that when you get it, every other man will have more than he has now. End quote. Personally, I think the whole idea of competing against someone is absurd. As one of my mentors once told me, until you're cloned, you have no competition. My intention is always to simply go within myself and have fun striving to most fully express myself in service to the world. I spend no time doing competitive analysis or worrying what other people are doing aside from recognizing cool stuff that I might want to do more of myself. How about you? Are you finding yourself overly concerned with striving against people? Can you focus more on being a creator, fully expressing yourself and giving your gifts to the world in the spirit of play? Say yes. Good answer. All right, the next big idea, we've got 2 more. All things change. Quote, "If you realize that all things change, there is nothing you will try to hold on to." End quote. Change. This is another one of those themes we come back to again and again. How about a few of my favorites on the subject? Marcus Aurelius talks about this often. He says, "Time is a river, the resistless flow of all created things. One thing no sooner comes in sight than it is hurried past and another is borne along, only to be swept away in its turn." He also says, "Reflect often upon the rapidity with which all existing things, or things coming into existence, sweep past us and are carried away." And finally, he says, "Even while a thing is in the act of coming into existence, some part of it has already ceased to be." Anthony de Mello tells us, quote, "As the great Confucius said, the one who would be in constant happiness must frequently change, flow. But we keep looking back, don't we? We cling to things in the past and cling to things in the present. Do you want to enjoy a symphony? Don't hold on to a few bars of the music. Don't hold on to a couple of notes. Let them pass. Let them flow. The whole enjoyment of a symphony lies in your readiness to allow the notes to pass. End quote. Heraclitus also reminds us, no man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man. So how about you? Are you holding on to anything a little more than might be wise? Let's embrace change and remember Robert Cooper's insight from the other 90%, where he tells us, the origin of the word change is the Old English cambium, which means to become. And here's the final idea, the master carpenter. Quote, trying to control the future is like trying to take the master carpenter's place. When you handle the carpenter's tools, chances are that you'll cut yourself. End quote. Beautiful. And it goes well with another one of my favorite thoughts on this theme. Sonia Choquette says this in her great book, Trust Your Vibes. See the notes on that. She says, quote, timing is the divine's way of again reminding us that we co-create with the universe. We aren't doing it alone. We plant, water, and weed the seeds of creativity, but we don't have the power to make them grow, let alone grow according to our schedule. How it all unfolds is up to God. God's wisdom will fulfill our deepest intentions once we set them in motion. Our part is to create the perfect conditions for the universe to flow through us, much like our job is to create the perfect conditions for the garden to grow. But that's all we can do. God flows through us and develops our gardens according to his own timetable. And thank goodness for that, because God knows and grows better than we do. End quote. So let's let the master carpenter and gardener do its work as we embrace the wisdom of the Tao, shall we? That, my friend, is a very, very quick look at the Dao De Jing. Let's take a quick look at the author of the Tao, Lao Tzu, as well as the translator and interpreter, Stephen Mitchell. Then we'll look at some of the other notes I think you'll enjoy and a few quotes from the sidebar. First, Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu was a philosopher of ancient China and is a central figure in Taoism. Lao Tzu literally means old master and is generally considered an honorific. According to Chinese tradition, he lived in the 6th century BC. Historians variously contend that he is a synthesis of multiple historical figures, that he is a mythical figure, or that he actually lived in the 4th century BC. A central figure in Chinese culture, both nobility and common people claim Lao Tzu in their lineage. That's adapted from Wikipedia, where you can learn more. About Stephen Mitchell. He's written extensively about spirituality, drawing from both Eastern and Western traditions. He is a poet and one of the world's preeminent translators of Rilke, the Psalms, Genesis, Job, the Bhagavad Gita, the Dao De Jing, and of other essential works. That's adapted from the book. You can learn more at stephenmitchellbooks.com. So if you like this, I think you'll also enjoy Loving What Is, the Bhagavad Gita, the Dhammapada, Meditations, the 7 Spiritual Laws of Success, Trust Your Vibes, and Awareness. Now, let's see if we can find a couple of quotes from the sidebar. Lao Tzu says this, men are born soft and supple. Dead, they are stiff and hard. Plants are born tender and pliant. Dead, they are brittle and dry. Thus, whoever is stiff and inflexible is a disciple of death. Whoever is soft and yielding is a disciple of life. The hard and stiff will be broken. The soft and supple will prevail. And finally, Lao Tzu says, knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom. Mastering others is strength. Mastering yourself is true power. There you go. That is the Philosopher's Note on the Dao De Jing, a new English version by Stephen Mitchell. Really hope you enjoyed it. Trust you're doing great. Wishing you a wonderful day and look forward to sharing more with you soon.
We hope you enjoyed this Philosopher's Note. Please go to www.philosophersnotes.com to download more.